And I always like to say one of the nicest things that happens at my job is when people come back, tell me the project went smoothly and they love the colors that they chose. And fortunately, with paint, it's a lot easier than wallpapering or some of those artistic full painting techniques. So fortunately, we hear that quite often, that things went smoothly. But every now and then, you're going to get some unfortunate things happening. And one is that when people pick a color, they're almost positive that they got the right one for their room after narrowing it down. And for some reason, there's a loss in translation when you put the color on the wall. The other thing that happens to people is that they want to try a really dramatic color change in a room, really go for a splash. And the project turns out just fine, the color-wise, but they'll come back and tell me that was way more of a chore than I thought I'd taken on, and I'll never do a color like that again. Well, there's been some advances. That's the main thing I want to talk about at the beginning. There's been some advances in paint that increase the odds that you're going to like the colors that you select and that the project is going to take less effort. So that's what we're going to be our theme to start with. Why is it sometimes, I don't know if it's ever happened to you, it has happened to me, where you took the chips home, put them against the carpet or the tile or the upholstery, and yet somehow when you put it on the wall, you're going, it's way too dark or too bright or too something or other. I've had an example. The reason that is, by the way, is color increases in intensity as you go from looking at it a small sample to a large area. So as a result, darker colors oftentimes appear darker, brighter appear brighter, and so on. Just a couple weeks ago, I had a customer come back and drop the paint on the counter. Real nice lady, but she just goes, "Help! You know, I thought I picked a real nice yellow for the kitchen, and it looks like a neon sign on my wall. You know, what happened?" And well, we're able to adjust it, tone it down, do what we can at the paint department to give her more of what she was hoping to get. But it was frustrating. You know, it's frustrating to not get what you want. So little tiny advancement, a little tiny thing like this made all the difference in the world. Just a couple years ago, the smallest drop of color you could put into a tinting machine to make your paint was a 1/96th of an ounce. Today, the smallest drop is a 1/728th of an ounce. So what that means is we're able to get any color you want practically in one of these little jars. And what better way to decide if it's the right color for you than see it on the wall? That's the simplest thing there is to it. There's a couple other advantages of these. It's a shame they couldn't have come up with this a lot earlier, but the machines just weren't sophisticated enough. The other advantage of the little samples is it allows you to check your color from an adjacent room. A lot of people have a very open floor plan, and designers will tell you we need to have a flow and harmony from one room to the other. Well, let's take a simple example of a dining room and a living room. You put this sample on the wall in your living room and get back into the dining room and compare your existing color to this potential new color to make sure they don't clash, to make sure there's this flow and harmony. It's pretty hard to tape something to the wall and be in that adjacent room and look 20 feet away or so and determine that everything is harmonious. So that's another advantage of the little sample jars. The one I like to say that I get a kick out of the most is it invites you to step beyond your comfort zone in color selection. I could do some real wild idea here, but let's just stick with a nice conservative idea like like this. You went to the store, you brought your ceramic tile or sample the carpeting, and we narrowed it down and determined these blend with that the best. Okay, in the past, we're going, well, I really like this color, but I hear that I don't want it to be too dark in the room, so we tend to go a little more conservative and go with a little lighter color. Sometimes that turns out to be the absolute right thing to do. But now that for just a couple dollars, under $3, you could test. Besides the conservative one, you could go test the little darker one, and you might discover that you got a wow effect. And you never would have known about this wow effect if you had just gone into the store and said, well, let's be safe and let's go with the lighter one. So for just a little expense, you might be highly rewarded with a more imaginative color selection. So please consider using those color samples for your project. Have you heard of the phrase, the paint and primer in one? That's kind of the rage right now. It started out, like even Behr was one of the originals. They were trying to find a paint that was more durable and more water resistant. Chemistry, they basically figured out a way to revise the molecular bonding so that it was a tighter film, so it's much more durable. Well, we could talk a lot about the paint and primer as far as that it is a primer, that it sticks well, seals well, but that's not what I want to talk about right now. I want you to be aware that there was a side effect when they formulated this paint, and they discovered a paint that covers way better than traditional paints. So I want to just show you something here. I was saying earlier how some people love to do a dramatic color change, but they say they'll never do that again because it was so much work. Well, so I decided to take a premium quality paint in one of those bolder colors. In this case, it's a color called Red Delicious, I think was the name of it. Delicious, Delicious Red. I took that premium quality eggshell paint and over this ridiculous background to show a point, I have 2 coats already of this red on right here. Frankly, if you were to try to finish this project, you might get it done by Easter. It takes so many coats. So which is a shame if somebody wants to do, they're designing a painting project is to go bolder. Well, over here, the same manufacturer, this happens to be the Glidden Dual for paint and primer. So I didn't compare poor to better or different manufacturers. I'm just dealing with the concept of paint and primer wherever you buy it. Traditional paint and primer, the same color, same roller, same background. There's 2 coats on here, 2 coats on here. So I invite you to seriously consider the fact that there's more reason to use this paint and primer than just because it's got a primer in it. In fairness, you look at this and you might go, geez, I guess he's saying don't ever use a regular wall paint, always use the paint and primer. Well, first of all, I took a simpler color, a light, kind of a beige, did the same thing. Here's just the wall paint, and there's the paint and primer. It is better. There's no question about it that this hides better. But after 2 coats, that's only 1 coat. After 2 coats, the premium paint did very well. So what you take from this really is that although you increase the odds of it taking fewer coats, no matter what color you're going to use, where you really want to consider using a paint and primer is with the darker colors and especially vivid, bright colors like that. Okay, there you go. Those 2 big things right there: samples and a new type of paint. talking a little bit about, I thought you'd, just for an FYI, talking a little bit about the different color styles out there. You know, they tell us to love the colors, live with the colors you love. That was the designing phrase I heard on, live with the colors you love. It's kind of expressing the fact that we each have different tastes. Color is really a personal thing. Some people like green and some like red, you know. But there's some basic color styles out there. There's like a light, the off-whites, that some people like to have that real light and airy feel to a room, to any space. There's earth tones or neutrals, whether they're dark or light, but the neutral, not a lot of color, very neutral. And people like that because it kind of gives a real comfortable, cozy feel to a room. And neutrals, and kind of like this that's just your basic neutral color. They virtually they coordinate with any color. So they call that a real safe way of designing. Then there's the real pure colors, the colors that have a lot of pop and energy to them. We see colors like this oftentimes in children's rooms. They love to go this direction. A lot of times you'll see their favorite sports team too, and usually sports teams have these real vivid colors because the idea of energy, that sport team concept. But we had a neat little experience at the Bloomington Home Depot. We're one of about 20 Home Depots that were given a new color palette, the whole new color center. We can certainly make any color that any of the other Home Depots, but ours is unique. That came in last February, and they put the computer technicians to work to try to tabulate the number of times these paints, all your paints, were dispensed. And they came up with about 12 of your more popular colors in the last year. And again, it's not, we all have different preferences, but I thought you might be interested in seeing a bunch of the colors that are popular right now. You notice there's different hues. It's not a preference of reds, but you've got your green, red, purples. There's even a blue. Somehow I don't know where that blue went, but essentially every color you can get. Light, and then we have preferences for light and dark colors. But what's the one thing that's in common that you see here? They're all shaded. They're toned down. In a color wheel, the idea is they have a combination of black and white added to them, a kind of a gray that gives kind of a subtle calming feel to a room. These are kind of the type of colors that your neighbors are buying at Home Depot right now, more often than others. Color is in, but muted, toned down. So there's just a little, it's still okay. But I just, like I said, for FYI, I've got a bunch of these chips over here if anyone just wants to take them or browse at them, by all means, when we're done. When you're talking about the, popular trends, about 10 years, well, first of all, wallpaper was huge back in the 60s, huge. Now it's kind of a lost skill. We get more people coming in asking how do I remove the wallpaper than where do you sell wallpaper? And then about 10 years ago, full painting was the big rage, that sponging on, ragging off, all that business. Well, and it was kind of fun, but that's gone now. One of the reasons is to make it really turn out right, you really need a little bit of an artistic gift to get that look just proper. Now the solid colors, seen in a variety of colors, are here. They're the trend right now. But every now and then, somebody's going to want a little bit of a special effect, and so I'm going to show you one right now called light strokes. Light strokes. The idea, it's not a paint; it's a specialty coating that whatever direction your brush goes, the light will reflect differently. Now, I don't know in here, does it kind of move around a little bit? Okay. So it's a very subtle, this little special effect, of kind of an elegant look. When you tilt it, you can kind of see, okay. That's it, like a hologram. Yeah. Now, this particular design I did, at home on my dining room table the other night. I want to explain this to show how simple these are. The first coat, I'm going to not mime it, but simulate it, because I wasn't sure where they were going to put me, and I didn't want to spill paint just in case. First of all, you put a coat of paint on just like you would any coat of paint, where you're going to cut in along the edge with your brush and roll on a coat of this product. When that first coat is done, there's nothing to it. It doesn't have to look even. It's just getting that background of this light strokes. There is a little bit of a shimmer as I do it from here, but that doesn't matter. What you do after a couple hours, after that dries, you would take your roller, and you don't have to cut in with the brush now, but you'd roll. This is a 9-inch roller. You'd roll two strips and fill that in, so you got an 18-inch column. With this really weird, it's called a round texture brush. It's dry. You just go into that wet paint and just place it down and twist it about a half a turn. And it's not like a cookie cutter, you got to get it exact. It's just real random down, overlap, overlap until you finish that column. Pretty darn easy. And you take your roller, you just overlap just a little bit, roll out another 18 inches, 2 strips, an 18-inch column, and go ahead and do that little twist. It's always going in the same direction, whether you're going to always go counterclockwise or clockwise. But they like, at least the manufacturer likes that idea. Who knows? I almost thought about trying where you kind of move it a little bit where it might almost look like the Starry Nights by Van Gogh. But I thought it was a nice, soft, elegant effect. By the way, that's made by, just so that happens to be one of those specialty coatings. This happens to be by Martha Stewart. And I have brochures to kind of explain some of those specialty effects if one wants that beyond the solid colors that are so popular right now. Kind of was saying that take less effort is one of the themes here. And you're going to get a real small class here in a roller cover. I don't know, when you go into a paint store to grab your roller, there's this wall, just nothing but roller covers. And we can narrow that down for design painting right off the bat, because you would be using a 3/8-inch nap roller traditionally. That's the size we're going to, a 3/8-inch nap, and they'll list it right on here, like right here, 3/8. A 3/8-inch nap gives you a smooth to for a smooth or semi-smooth surface. Basically, most of our walls in our homes. If you had a textured wall with a little more, do you see how this one's got a little more of a nap to it? That's a 1/2 inch nap. So if you did have a textured wall, you'd want to use that. But traditionally, this is what we're going to use for our walls. You'll see these real narrow naps. This one's called a 1/4 inch nap. That's what you want to use if you decide to paint your kitchen cabinets, or you got these new, or you want to paint your doors. That'll give you the smoothest look as possible, and it's perfect for doors and cabinets. Someone might go, well, it's so smooth, why can't I use it on the walls? You can, but it's not as important on the walls, and this is going to take a lot of work because it doesn't hold a lot of paint. So 3/8 is the way to go. So you've narrowed down that wall with all those rollers there. Now comes the next one. There's 2 types of rollers out there, a woven and a knit roller. Real simple, woven roller gives you your smoothest look, whether you go from a flat paint all the way up to a high gloss, and they're shed resistant. I don't know if you ever had that where you get that lint, you got to fish the lint off the wall before it dries. Smooth coating used for all sheens, lint resistant. And again, there's that word there, woven. The other roller is a knit roller. But they're talking about the backing that the fabric is attached to, kind of like the backing of a carpet. The woven and knit. Now the knit doesn't give as smooth a look, so you wouldn't want to use it for anything more than like a flat or an eggshell finish, because it's going to look bad with a shinier paint. And they are prone to lint. Oh, I don't know if I can. So why would you ever use a knit over the woven? Well, the basic reason some people like to use these is they held more paint. So when you load up the roller, you're getting more space done before you have to go back in the roller. Here's the big advance. Microfiber is a new, microfiber upholstery or microfiber jackets or cleaning cloths. They decided to try making a roller out of a microfiber. It's got the best of both worlds. It's got the smooth finish, so it can be used in low finishes all the way up to high gloss. It's shed resistant. So far, we're doing great. And it holds 3 times as much paint. So it's the perfect hybrid of the 2 typical rollers. Some people go, well, okay, I'm okay with a good quality woven roller, and that's fine. But I don't know about you, but I'd rather be painting the wall than painting that roller tray every couple of seconds. And what subconsciously we used to do with a roller is you're supposed to let the roller do the work and use light, even pressure to get a uniform coat. But what do we do a lot of times, because we're going back to the tray so often? You start to, instead of releasing the paint, you're squeezing the paint out of the roller to get a few extra feet on the wall. And of course that gets a little tiring to do that for a whole room. And it also will leave an uneven finish and these roller edge marks, these little lines in the wall when you're done. And sometimes you go, I got to put another coat on. So woven gives you a nice advantage. The microfiber gives you the nice advantage of woven, but it holds a lot more paint. So you know a little more about rollers than a lot of people at the paint department, I think, in some stores right there. That had to do with capacity, making the job a little easier. I'm going to just take a little time here. We're not going to teach how to brush, but just simply how to load a brush. It's pretty simple. How do we load a brush? You got your quart can or your gallon can. It's about half full or full, and you're dipping it in, and we're going like this, and away we go. Simple. Well, number one, there's a reason pros use these painter cups. why would you want to be holding, you know, a whole quart or half a quart with no handle, or grab the gallon of paint and brush when you can be carrying maybe about 15 ounces. Much easier, and it got a handle, and because it's down this low and you got these high walls, there's less chance of sloshing the paint and spilling, which obviously we want to protect the areas that we don't want to get paint on. But that's not the reason I wanted to bring this up. The anatomy of a brush, I just want to bring up one point of it. So I grabbed the biggest brush I had at my house. I don't know if you can, do you see those little spaces in between there? There's a little gap. They call that a plugs. And every brush is designed this way. Just those little gaps right there. The way a brush is designed is that you're dipping the brush into the paint, and you're filling these reservoirs inside it with paint, so that as you're brushing and the paint is released from the tips, more paint takes its place. It's kind of like a fountain pen. Okay, well, when we did that thing at the beginning, how do you take it? You just take it and go like this. Well, what you're doing is you're collapsing that reservoir, so there's no paint into that space in there. And essentially, the paintbrush is working like a quilt, a pen, where you're dipping it into the ink well, you write it for a few moments, then you got to dip it back in, and that's what we're doing. The right way to load a brush is, and that's really why we have these walls here, not just to slosh the paint, but dip your brush in about halfway and tap it. Tap it against the walls, and away you go. That tapping is pressing that paint into those reservoirs. So now this paint is fully loaded. To show you what happened, a little difference between the two ways of doing it. What I did is right here, up on the top, I took the paint and the brush, did what I said, tap it, and then I just started even pressure, kept going. Now I'm starting to die out, and then it pretty much gone. Right below it, when we did it, and now it was even wet, because that was the first stroke. Now it's even got more paint on it, but I didn't tap it, and went like this. And you go just a few inches, and you ran out of paint. Down here, same thing, where you tapped it, where I went, and then I turned the brush the other way and evened it out. Whereas down below, it's by doing it our traditional way, and you ran out of paint a lot quicker. It's kind of neat. It also has a more starved look than the same loading process, but this one is a much fuller coat. When you have a starved look and you don't go as far, you start pressing down harder, just like that roller, and you have to go over it and over it and over it to even it out, and that creates brush strokes. So try that sometime, loading the brush with putting it in the paint cup and tapping it. Even if instinctively we all sometimes will do this, but if you tap that first to load that, it's going to be much better. So so we talked about a way to affirm that the color you picked is going to look good on your wall. We've got a paint that's going to maybe take fewer coats. The roller that's easier on the back, get the job done faster, and the proper way to roll. Now comes the tape, the removal of the tape. I love that part of it because it kind of symbolizes the end of the project. It's kind of like it's going to be the first time you see it against that woodwork, like at an art museum, the unveiling of the new piece of art. And what do we want to see when we take that off? We want to see a nice, sharp, crisp line, because the idea of tape is to keep it off the surfaces you don't want to get paint on. So we have there's three types of tape, all from the same manufacturer. I want to talk about real briefly here. Your traditional white masking tape, been around forever. It did the job of sorts, but you got to be careful with this, because it's real sticky, and you better remove it within 3 days. You really should remove tape while it's still wet, but a lot of us aren't going to do that, because we want to make sure we don't need a second or third coat, and we're not going to re-put the tape down. But you better get this off in 3 days. Your traditional blue tape is been around for over 15 years. It's what you see on any home improvement show. That's the tape they're going to be using. Real good tape. But there's an advancement. There we go again, with less effort or advances. The blue tape that has what we call a sharp edge. So I want to show you the difference there. By the way, on the stickiness, that white tape, like I said, was about a 3-day clean removal. The blue tape is a medium adhesion. It's about a 14-day. And then they make this edge lock for delicate surfaces at 60-day clean removal. So my neighbor would love that, because I've been staring out my window looking at his basement window, and that tape's been on for about 6 months. I don't know when he's going to get that job done. But let's check the cleanness, the bleeding. So I did this white tape, and you see, it's a little hard. There's a lot of bleeding going on underneath there. So, yeah, that's the white masking tape. Yep. Then there's your traditional blue tape that's been around, much better than that white tape. There's just a little bit of bleeding through here, but not bad at all. See that? And now here comes this same brush, same day, same time on here. Here's this edge lock. And look at this. It's perfectly crisp. Now, the theme I have with this is that I'd rather have a plain white painted room with sharp, crisp lines between the wall and the woodwork than the most professionally designed colors and have this bleeding through or jagged, messy edges. Yes?
What do you think of that frog tape?
Well, very good. Frog tape is as good, if not even better, than the edge lock. It's the equal to the edge lock. In fact, I might even have one here just to show you. It symbolizes kind of what we did here. The bleeding through, and then the frog tape is that super sharp line. So it's another great tape. The only difference between frog tape and the delicate surface 3M one is that has a little more of a medium adhesion. So, for instance, if you were doing stripes, you need to wait at least 3 days. If you put the first coat on and you were going to then put stripes on this base coat, you need to dry at least 3 days before you put the tape on. This delicate surface, you can apply it after 24 hours. So it has this is better for if somebody still has wallpaper and you're protecting that wallpaper and painting the wall next to it, you'd want to use this delicate surface so there's less stickiness that might pull that off. Or on woodwork, I don't want to risk the polyurethane being lifted, so delicate. But for cured paints, the frog tape is excellent. Yep. In fact, I wish No, I did do a project. I did a striping project with the. They have a delicate surface. I'm being fair to Frog Tape. They do have a delicate. We just don't have it at Home Depot. It's a yellow-colored Frog Tape. Okay. Well, I tell you, I've kind of covered the main things I wanted to touch base with you today as far as the brush and the roller and the new paints. Are there any questions about anything that you got? Yes.
Well, you mentioned the paint that has the primer and the paint together.
Yep.
Is that better than using a primer and a paint?
Well, here's a good question. It depends on the situation. The primers still serve a function if, for instance, you've got somebody smoked in the house and we need to seal that odor. There's special primers designed to seal that odor. If you've got water stains, there's specialty primers out there. You need a specialty primer for water stains or odors or smoke stains. As far as, let's pretend you're doing your kitchen cabinets, they're the old varnish, and you decide you want to paint them. The paint and primer does have a great adhesion, enough so that they say, it is a primer. When you come to that old varnished cabinets or woodwork or a real glossy painted surface, I still like to see a primer. There's still a little more glue in a traditional primer than in the paint and primer in one. If you were to go with just the paint and primer in one, you'd have to make sure you scuff sand that to degloss and create a little tooth for it to stick to. So yeah, there's like 10 different primers, specialty primers, indoor, outdoor, water-based, oil-based. So you got to tell us what your specific situation is so we can determine if you need that special primer or not. On that red, even as good as this paint and primer is in coverage than a traditional paint, there are certain colors they're still going to recommend that you put a tinted primer down first. But even at that, you're still going to get the job done in fewer coats than you would if you did the tinted primer and then this product on top of it. Just so you know about that, you've heard of Kills, that oil-based Kills, which has been around forever. That's what we used for if we had wallpaper residue. We got to lock that in. We can't put a water-based primer over some wallpaper residue. Again, if you had a water stain, you're not going to block that traditionally with a water base. You got to use the oil-based Kills. Well, there's another advancement just very recently called Kills Max for those that absolutely can't use oil paint. And they came up with it for fire restoration people. It's called Kills Max, and it's a water-based primer, specialty primer that acts like a shellac primer or an oil-based primer that'll block water stains, block odors, and it'll stick to the old wallpaper adhesive. We're introducing that a little bit to nursing homes or assisted living where they got to do some of this priming, but we can't be using the oil-based primers there. But these fire restoration companies that'll do a huge project with soot like this room almost, and they're getting sick and tired of that strong smelling high VOC oil-based products. And they've had a lot of success with that. So if you're in a situation like in your basement, I still like oil-based primers, but if you're in a situation where you just can't handle that smell, or you're concerned about flammability issues like down in the basement with the water heater pilot or the furnace, ask about this Kills Max. Yes, it is. Like an oil-based, the oil-based Kills, let's say it's around $16 a gallon. This Kills Max is going to be in the low 30s. But a pigmented shellac, which is probably one of the best primers out there for some of this problem solving, that's now in the $40 a gallon. The shellac comes from a little bug, I think in Thailand, the juice from a little bug in Thailand. It's been around for 400 years. It's the best primer out there, but it's a supply and demand, and that I think a 5 gallon of that is now around $170 a 5. So that's when they wanted to come up with this water-based product that works like a shellac. And so far, so good. But yes, it's definitely more money. Yes?
Could that be used like a primer on kitchen cabinets?
It certainly could. It's got great adhesion, but it's an overkill for that. You could, after you clean the cabinets with let's say a TSP substitute, rinse that and then lightly sanded it and took that dust off. There's some nice bonding primers out there that are around $19 a gallon. That'll do the job as well as that one. Bullseye 1, 2, 3, or Glidden has one called the Gripper, and Kills has one, and Bear has one. The Bear one is great. I did that on some old shellac cabinets in South Minneapolis, and that stuck like glue. So I was real happy with that. So yes.
You mentioned pigmented primers earlier.
Yep.
Are you recommending that on the darker paints colors that you go with the pigmented primer in lieu of the traditional white?
Yes.
What would be the color break where you would suggest pigmented?
Well, it's probably, to be honest with you, there is none. I'm game to do it. I'm game to do it for anything, the tinted. But when you get into the mid-tone colors that have like 5 ounces of colorant in the gallon can, it's beneficial. What he's talking about is you say, hey, I got to prime my walls first, okay, and let's pretend I'm going to be painting it this color. Well, for no charge, we'll tint the primer, kick it in the direction of this color. Primer is a white, and we can only put in so many ounces of colorant before you affect the performance of a primer. So you're never going to get it to match that finish coat color. It'll be a lighter version. But I will do it for any, but that's really the most important, is about a mid-tone up. Speaking of ounces and dark colors, it says we're talking about paints now, not necessarily primers, but it says on the can to dry 1 to 2 hours, to recoat in 4 hours. Well, a rule I like to give you, especially for dark colors, is for every ounce of colorant in that gallon, wait an hour. And the main reason for that is it is not a paint film yet after a few hours. And when you've got this color here's got 12 ounces of colorant easily. And if it looked like this, the temptation would be to want to hurry up and roll another coat, because I want to get this covered, But the water in the paint will re-wet that colorant if you do it too early, and you can get a streaky look. And it actually affects the ability to cover in fewer coats. So I guess what I'm saying is okay, if you can't wait overnight, if it calls for 12 ounces, if you can wait 6 or 7, it's better than 2 to 4, But in a perfect world, 1 hour delay for every ounce of colorant in a gallon is a good way to go about it.
I feel like this is a silly question, but I wouldn't know. Like, is that a normal thing that people ask you? Is how many ounces of colorant you add?
No, that's why when people will come back and go, I don't know what happened. They did a bathroom, and that first coat wasn't set, and they put another coat on, or two or three coats, and then the shower, and all of a sudden they see this streaky. Because underneath that was trapped, kind of, and the water kind of leaches through, and now the colorant re-wets. Colorant itself, if you ever, it dries, but if I could paint this with a colorant, let's say, and 6 months from now, even, it'd be a nice, let's say, yellow or red colorant. 6 months from now, I could take a spritz bottle and spray it, and it would turn liquid again. So the whole idea, colorant will, where it hardens is when it encapsulates with the paint particles, the resin, the acrylic resin. Before that time, anytime it's reintroduced to water, it can weep again, and that's why we for more ounces we like to wait a little longer. So it is something they'll ask, but it's something we'll try to mention as they're taking the paint away from the counter. You know, you might want to consider fighting the temptation to hurry up and get this job done and wait overnight for the second coat.
What's your recommendation for the best primer over new drywall?
Well,
I used a product just recently on some bathroom walls that I thought had patched, and it was
They sell all over the country.
PVA drywall primer, I think it was called, and I just wasn't happy with it.
no, yeah, and not only that, PVA stood for polyvinyl acrylate. It's an inexpensive drywall primer to seal the paper and the mud, but it's if you look at it, it's thin. It's there to just seal, but it doesn't have it doesn't really have the moisture resistance and the enamel holdout of a better primer. Here's what I'm getting at with that question. If you look at it under a microscope, a PVA primer looks almost like the Rocky Mountains. It's very coarse. Even on the sheetrock where it's pulled in, it's very porous and coarse. Primers like that, the Behr enamel undercoater or the Bullseye 1, 2, 3, there's probably 5 of them out there. The ones they call multi-purpose primers, if you look at that under a microscope, whereas the one looked like the Rocky Mountains, these primers look like North Dakota. Nice and level. And they have a lot of it, it's a tighter film so that they seal the paper very well. And now the top coat, your semi-gloss or your satin finish, you get much better holdout, you get a much leveler look, and the sheen is uniform, and it's going to give you more moisture protection because some of it didn't get pulled into that more porous primer. So for bathrooms, or especially and kitchens, I like more of that all-purpose primer, like the Behr enamel undercoater is a great one, and a Bullseye 1, 2, 3 is a very popular one.
Are you familiar with the grip and seal? I think it's Sherwin-Williams.
I'm not, but it sounds like a pretty good. I mean, like Glidden has one called the Gripper, and it's a terrific primer for things like that. You could just look on it should usually tell you whether it's an acrylic or a PVA, vinyl acrylate. The PVAs or vinyls are more porous. They're fine for basic sheetrock, for you putting your flat paints or all that. They're inexpensive. They do the job fine. But for a little higher performance, go to the ones that they'll say they're more like an acrylic polymer, something of that sort. And I'll bet you that one is, with a name like that. Just sealant would lead me to believe it could be anything, but grip and seal tells me there's more of an adhesion value, and that's usually a better grade resin in there.
Is that going to help out in bathrooms and kitchens where you've got exposure to moisture on the wall?
Yeah.
To use a higher grade?
It's more mildew resistant and more moisture resistant, and it helps the top coat to be more on the surface, so it'll protect from the moisture too.
What would you recommend for priming for some black mold that I found in the shower wall? After I pulled the old tile off. My first thing is I sprayed it with bleach to kill the mold.
Yeah.
And then clean it up, and then what kind of, do you have a specialty primer that?
No, no, he was asking about a pretty bad mold situation there. And of course, the step number one, ideally, is someone's going to figure out where this came from. But you're absolutely right. You've got to kill that mold. Bleach is common, but there are some aluminum sulfate products like that don't use bleach, but they use salts that kill like bleach will, but they also help block it from coming back. Bleach is more of a wow factor right then and there, takes care of it. But whichever one you use, after you've killed the bleach, and by the way, people think Kills is a primer that kills mold. It is not. You have to kill the mold first. The Kills will kill the stain, if there's a stain left afterwards. But once you've prepped it properly, I will tell you simply that putting that high-grade primer or the Bear paint and primer has an antimicrobial mildew-resistant finish. I'm not sure if you were here at the beginning a little bit, but it has these paint and primers. I was saying they have a new molecular bonding. There's a tighter film, so it's more water resistant. So and if you use a semi-gloss finish, or I guess a satin, there's less chance for that mold spores to cling to that paint because it's a slick surface. But I would suggest if somebody had an area they have this happen quite a bit after you've killed it, and for that I would still use that Concrobian is one of these products. Like if you're going to in the basement, you spray that in there before you put your wall back up, because now you got this blocker in the wall that's going to help to fight mold. Concrobian, I think it's CROBIUM, something like that, Concrobian. A mold eliminator, mold mildew eliminator, and blocker. They use that a lot down in New Orleans after Katrina. That was one of the big things because it gives you more. Again, bleach is a right then, and then that's it. Spores could come right back and start again, but this kills it, but it also blocks it. And so if I did the proper killer, put the primer or the satin or semi-gloss antimicrobial paints on, I might consider spraying that Concrobian on again. But you can put that on and put your paint on too, and they'll work as a team. Yeah, they got it in a spray bottle, and then they got it in gallons that people will sometimes put into those fogging machines to do a house that's completely shot. So yeah, they do have that. Yeah, give that a thought. I always thought bleach was the only way to go, but there are some other chemicals that the mold experts are recommending. Yes?
Will people carry the any such thing as a waterproof paint like
Yes, there's two. There's been one that's been around for years that's called Drylock. It's a very cementitious coating. There's actually a Portland cement in it. It goes into the block pores, and it kind of expands and gets you your lock. So water coming through the basement walls, they're blocked from coming out. Clearly we want to focus on what caused this in the first place. Is it a downspout that's gone, or do we need a gutter and things like that? But it's been around, and it's very effective. But it's a heavy body product, and they actually want you to brush it the first coat.
Can you put it over if I already like extra wall?
Okay. They can't warranty it. Some people say, no, it's not going to help. I've found it still helps. It helps cut down the mustiness. Now, the weak link is that first coat of paint. So as moisture's coming through, that could fail, and then everything will fail. But I say it's worth it. I mean, what's your option? Is to sandblast it all off? I think it's worth it. But there's one other waterproof paint. And that's where that original paint and primer and one came from Behr. They were trying to come up with, they used this nanotechnology I talk about to make a waterproof paint. It works a little different than that dry lock, and it goes on just like a normal paint. So if you're able to roll it on, whereas the other one you got a brush, and if I'm doing a whole basement, I kind of like that. It's a different technology because of that tight bonding, tight film, it stops it. But they're both rated as a 10-year, if it was Behr block, they'd call it a 10-year warranty. When you do that, if you're only going to do one coat, they'll usually recommend 2 coats, but at least do a second coat the bottom 2 or 3 feet, because that's where the pressure builds up the most. So if you're going, I've had enough of this, I got 1 coat, that's plenty. Well, if you got some left, at least if we can do the bottom, that's still much more helpful than up higher. They just call it basement and masonry waterproofer. No fancy name, just Behr basement and masonry waterproofer. And it comes in gallons and 5s. And that one, unlike the dry lock, you can make in some colors too. It's not just the white. Hi, yes.
You know, that paint sample, is that only with certain brands, or you have?
For us, it's 2 brands. It's the Martha Stewart colors, the Glidden colors. That's done in an eggshell sample. The Behr is an indoor-outdoor paint and primer in one, flat. But we can do all of their colors, but we can also do, if somebody had Porter paint. I don't want to use anybody around this area. Porter paint or some on the chip that you got from California. Usually we have it on record, or we can scan it. A lot of people have these now. It's not just us. These sample jars, when they first came out, Divine had them. They were little pamphlets, little packages, but there was only about 200-300 colors because you couldn't tint it at the store, like I was saying. So now you can do any color you want. The only one you can't do, every now and then there's a white that only has a drop of coloring in a quart, and so it's pretty hard to divide that by 4, 1 drop. So every now and then we'll say, I'm sorry, I can't do that in a sample size, but practically any color out there I can do. All right. Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed this time. I appreciate the questions.